That's number one. Today, we're going to discuss a part of the parsha that you may not find relevance to yet, but as we go through the prepared information, you will find something of relevance here and something of import for all of us. And that is, the parsha of the week is Acharei and Kedoshim. And the beginning of the parsha talks about the laws of Yom Kippur. The end of Acharei, we learn about the laws of marriages that are not okay in Jewish law, and maybe in 2021 that should be the focus topic, but we're going to leave that for today. And then in Kedoshim there is further conversation. So in the temple, there's always there's what do you call them? You call them avoda. There's services. All of these different services, each one has its own details and decrees and things that are important over there. In the second temple, the tensions between the Sadducees and the Pharisees came to a head, and we were very worried at the time that the faction of the Sadducees would lead and take over, and they would control a certain part of the service. Which part of the service were we afraid that they would control? We were afraid that they would take over the part of offering the Ketores. Now we all wonder what's the content of the Ketores, and that doesn't happen to be, it's a forgotten piece of information. We no longer know. But what we do know is that there are multiple ways to do it. And so here we go with the first source. Source one, which I'm sharing with you all, is from our parsha, Leviticus chapter 16, verses 2 to 4 and 12 to 13, which we'll read over here. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you guys to join me in reading it. So since the newcomers always get the most attention, let's ask Maxine or Richard to join us to read for us the first, you know what, you guys are two people, so read for us two paragraphs over here, please.
God said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron not to indiscriminately enter the inner sanctuary behind the curtain concealing the ark, and he will not die, for in a cloud I will appear on the ark's cover. Aaron should enter this inner sanctuary with a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He must wear a sacred linen tunic and linen pants, gird himself with a linen sash, and bind his head with a linen turban. These are sacred garments. He must immerse in water and then don them.
He shall take a pan full of fiery coals from the altar before God, and a double handful of fine ketoret incense, and bring them beyond the curtain. And he shall place the incense on the fire before God. The ketoret smoke will envelop the cover of the Ark of Testimony, and he will not die."
Okay, awesome. So thank you for reading that for us. What we've discovered here is that what we've discovered here is that the part of the service in the temple for Yom Kippur is that there is the Ketores. What is the Ketores? It's incense. What happens with this incense? Well, you need to, the Kohen Gadol, the only person, by the way, who does the service during during Yom Kippur, the only person who does the service on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol, he should take the pan of the Ketores, bring it into the Holy of Holies, and then cause it to raise up a cloud of smoke. And when that cloud of smoke covers over the ark, that is a sign that the Jewish people have been completely forgiven, and that the service of Yom Kippur has been completed. what is in the last line? We've skipped how do we go back in a slideshow right here? In the last line, you can see the Torah smoke will envelop the cover of the Ark of the Testimony, and he will not die. What are the repercussions of doing this service wrong? If you do the service, if the Kohen Gadol, the leader of the service, would do it wrong, would misperform, he would suffer by passing away. And in fact, there was a method of retrieving the body of the Kohen Gadol if he did pass away, and that is, they tied a rope to his leg, and if they heard that he had passed on, or he didn't come out long enough, they would pull the string and pull until he came out, until they, and it sounds a bit morbid, but why is this so? Well, we do know from elsewhere that this is the holiest, from these verses. Is it here? It's not here. We know from elsewhere then that it's right here in the first line. Tell your brother Aaron not to indiscriminately enter the inner sanctuary behind the curtain concealing the ark. He shouldn't go into the Holy of Holies. Why? Well, it's the holiest place, and as such, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, goes in only once a year, and he doesn't go in more than that. And so, given that it's so holy, one has to go in well prepared and fit for the job. Now, any of you who have studied through the Nach, the Nevi'im, should find a memory somewhere stored in your minds of a certain, I don't even think he was a righteous fellow. I don't remember his name. Half the story clearly evades me, but he was this fellow was running away from an enemy, and he ran into the temple, and he ran into the Holy of Holies, and he stayed there for something like 7 years. Now you're asking, how did he eat, and how did he take care of himself? I don't have good answers for you, but this is a story that's recorded in the prophets, and it's just fascinating to think of this as a contrast to the verse we just read. Okay, nevertheless, what do we discover from right over here? So the Kohen Gadol will bring all of this stuff into the temple, brings it up in smoke, and that is the moment of success, that the service in the temple has been complete and successful. Okay, we're going to move on now to source 2, which is on the screen, and this is from Maimonides in the Mishnah Torah, the laws of Yom Kippur, chapter 1, law 7, and who am I going to ask to read this one? Let's go. Let's ask Shmuel, Professor Blumenthal.
Okay. Heresy sprung up in Israel in the Second Temple era, and the Sadducees emerged, may they speedily perish, who rejected the oral law. They maintained that the Yom Kippur incense is first placed on coals in the outer sanctuary, outside the curtain of the Holy of Holies, and when its smoke rises, it is brought into the Holy of Holies. Their rationale was based on the Torah phrase, "For in a cloud I will appear on the ark's cover." They understood this as a reference to the cloud of incense. But our sages learned from the oral tradition that the incense is to be placed on the coals in the Holy of Holies before the ark, as the verse states, "And he shall place the incense on the fire before God."
Okay, and there's a second page over here, and so I'll ask Reb Shmuel to continue reading for us.
Since the high priests of the Second Temple era were suspect of heresy, the elders would have him take an oath on the day preceding Yom Kippur. They would tell him, "My sir, the high priest, we are agents of the court, and you are our agent and an agent of the court. We administer an oath to you in the name of he who causes his name to dwell in this house, that you not deviate from our instructions." The high priest would turn away and cry because they suspected him of heresy, and they would turn away and cry because they suspected a person without knowing his opinions. Maybe he had no such thoughts in his heart.
Okay, so thank you, Reb Shmuel, for reading that for us. We don't see all of us, right? What do we see? We just see the screen. Stop the share. Okay, so what did we learn? What did we find over here in the section that we just read? So number one is that we're introduced to the Sadducees and what they're up to. The Sadducees are the people who believe that the Torah that the Torah is just the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses that we're all familiar with, we read through the parshas of the week for 52 weeks that we read in the shul. But they said that the oral Torah, that stuff is it's made up. It's not of any relevance, or it doesn't need to be followed, God forbid. And so as such, they had a different way of reading and understanding the verses. And so what we saw in the second paragraph, which is no longer on the screen, we discovered that there's 2 ways to read. There's 2 verses that you can focus on. You can focus on one verse, and then you have to get the smoke going before you go into the Holy of Holies. And if you focus on the other verse, you need to get the smoke going when you're in the Holy of Holies. And this became, so if you go along with the oral tradition, so then you know that it has to be done within the Holy of Holies. However, if you want to ignore the tradition, so then you end up being without this information. And as such, there was a clear distinction between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the Tzedukkim, and I don't know what would you call the other ones in Hebrew? Whatever, I don't know. So what was the solution? The solution was that they would bring the Kohen on the day before Yom Kippur, and they'd set him up outside the temple in the high court that was positioned in the temple grounds, and they tell him, Kohen Gadol. Did we quote the words? They say to him, the Hebrew is, Ishi Kohen Gadol, my sir, the high priest. We are the messengers of the court, and you are our agent and an agent of the court, and we would like you to make an oath that you will not stray from our instructions. Why the need to make the oath? Because perhaps the Kohen Gadol is going to do otherwise. And so they need to be sure that he's following with the program. But immediately after the oath, both the court and the individual and the Kohen Gadol, they all separate, and they go in their different ways, and they begin to cry. And our question is, why are they crying? What's the tears about? And I'm going to actually open the floor. If anybody would like to give a guess as to why they were crying, that would be cool. Slide. I'm going to reshare, and then we'll continue with the next slide. Let's see how this goes. Share. Is it this one? Share. Which one do you see? Wrong one. Professor Blumenthal, do you know what I did wrong? All right. So here we have the next source. This is going to be source, I guess. It's not source 4 because in the text it's not source 4, but it's our fourth quote. And here is a comment from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe is wondering the same question. Why are they all crying? And again, this time it's going to be a couple of pages. So I'd like to ask Juan, would you read for us this section from the Rebbe?
Sure. My English is no good, but I will try. Let's see. It sprung up in Israel in the Second Temple era, and the Sadducees emerged. May they speedily perish, who reject the oral law. They maintain that Yom Kippur incense is first placed on coal in the sanctuary outside the curtains of the Holy of Holies, and then its smoke rise. It is brought into the Holy of Holies. Their rationale was based in the Torah phrase, "For in a cloud I will appear on the ark cover." They understood this as a reference to the cloud of incense. But our sages learned from the oral tradition that the incense is to be placed on the poles in the Holy of Holies, before the ark, as the verse states, and he shall place the incense in the fire before God.
Okay, hold on. And page 2.
Since the high priests of the Second Temple era were suspected of heresy, the elders would have him take an oath for the day preceding Yom Kippur. They would tell him, "My sir, the high priest, we are agents of the court, and you are our agent, and an agent of the court. We administrate an oath to you in the name of he whose caused his name to dwell in this house, that you not deviate from our instructions." He would turn away and cry from being suspected of heresy, and they would turn away and cry because they suspect a person without knowing his opinions. Maybe he had no such thought in his heart. That's what I think.
Okay, awesome. And finally, the last 2 paragraphs. Juan, can you handle all this?
Yes, this is quite puzzling. Why do they force the high priest to swear that he won't deviate and then cry for suspecting him? If it is considering undesirable behavior for suspecting him, why he didn't administer the oath without investigating his opinions? And if Torah rules that the oath must be administered regardless, why cry? They had merely fulfilled God's instructions. Another question: why would the high priest cry for being administered the oath? Was he responsible for being suspected?
Okay, so thank you, Juan, for reading that for us. And here we come really to section 2 of our conversation. That is, what's going on? How honest, how reliable, how truthful is this guy? Is this Kohen Gadol? How much do we have to be worried about him at this point? And so what we'll do is we'll read a section from the Gemara, then we'll read a section from the Tanchuma. The Tanchuma is the Medrash, and the Medrash will tell us all about the value of the Ketores, of the incense, and then we'll return to what the Rebbe was telling us, and he will continue to discuss how everybody is feeling about the Kohen Gadol. All of this follows with a piece from the Yalkut Shimoni, again a Medrash, which tells us about a Sadducee which actually went ahead and did the Sadducee-style service, and what happened to him. Okay, so let's take a look at source number 3 over here. This would be the Talmud, and let's ask Carlos. Carlos, will you read for us Moed Katon 18b?
Yes. Okay. Rabbi Reuven ben Itzriboli said, "A person won't be suspected of something unless he did it. If he did not do it fully, he did it partially. If he did not do it partially, he planned to do it. And if he didn't plan to do it, he saw others do it and he was happy."
I think, it just as an aside, I think that is itself a fascinating thing to say, right? If he didn't do it, then he saw someone else do it. And how relevant, by the way, is this Talmud to what happens nowadays all over the world? And so much of the conversation in the world right now is all about what things are happening and what people are saying about them. And I guess maybe we all take a piece of it by not having made some active effort to not be involved. I don't know. Okay, I don't know how responsible we are to make a protest to say that we're not involved. Okay, nevertheless, moving on. Source number 4 from the Tanchuma. The high priest would place the incense in a pan on Yom Kippur and enter the most sacred spot, the Holy of Holies. If the cloud of incense ascended upward like a cluster of grapes, he knew that Israel's sins were forgiven and his service was acceptable. But if the smoke of the incense did not cover the ark, he knew that he would die. Consequently, the high priest and all Israel trembled from the moment the high priest entered the Holy of Holies until he withdrew in peace. When he would exit, the people of Israel would rejoice that it had been received favorably. God said, of all sacrifices you offer, the incense is most beloved. And another quote from the same section, look how precious the Ketoret is. A plague was halted by Ketoret, as Moses said to Aaron, take your fire pan and put fire on it from the altar, place Ketoret upon it. Aaron took it as Moses instructed and ran into the midst of the assembly, and behold, the plague had begun among the people. I think this is, what do you mean the plague had begun? I don't know. Maybe it should say the plague ended. I don't know. We have to check in the Chumash Monday. And here we go to the Rebbe on this. And this is going to be the solution for the whole conversation. So we can put things into perspective. The high priest, understandably, is upset that he is suspect. They're worried that he's feeling bad about it. Why do they think that he is going to be a bad representative of the people, that he's not going to fulfill the needs of the people? However, the elders could have eased their consciences. The Torah was very important, and it was vital to ensure that it was done correctly. They could have felt okay about themselves. The fact that they were emotional as well tells us something about their sensitivities. Instead of excusing themselves, they were profoundly disturbed for suspecting another Jew. Let's take a look at the explanation. And what we'll do here, I think, is that we'll make a rotation. Let's make a rotation of all of our participants. So we'll start with Shmuel, we'll go to Juan, and then we'll go to Carlos. How does that sound? So paragraph.
Okay, the high priest would turn away and cry because, as our sages taught, a person won't be suspect unless, etc. In other words, if you are suspected, you clearly are somewhat capable of it. If it was indeed out of the question, you would never have been suspected of it.
Juan.
They would turn away and cry because they suspect a person without knowing his opinions. Maybe he had no such thought in his heart. They were compelled to administrate the oath despite the unpleasantness of the exchange to ensure that the Yom Kippur service in the Holy of Holies was executed properly.
Okay, Carlos.
Okay. For the Ketoret service of the high priest in the Holy of Holies was a most important service that had profound implications for the Jewish people's upcoming year. The high priest's bull and ram had various levels of significance. There was the sacrifice of the high priest, of his household and of his tribe, and of the entire people Israel, and other sacrifices as well. However, the Ketoret service on Yom Kippur was a singular service that was carried out on only once a year, on the holiest day in the holiest spot, the Holy of Holies, and by the most sanctified Jew in the nation, the holy nation, as the verse states. And Aaron was separated to be sanctified as Holy of Holies.
Okay. Because of the lofty nature of this service, it was important to do everything possible to ensure that it was carried out correctly, even if it would imply that we suspect another Jew. Nonetheless, they retained their feelings of Ahavat Yisrael, of the love of a fellow. They were profoundly disturbed by the fact that they needed to suspect another Jew, even by the command of the Torah, to the point that they were moved to tears, which, according to Kabbalah, represents extensions of our intellect. In other words, the more they contemplated the matter, the more they could not contain their distress, to the point that it was expressed through tears. That you see how what we take away here so far is how emotional and how sensitive the high court was to the feelings of the high priest, even though most likely he was a straight, honest guy. But since there's a slight possibility they had to give him and administer this promise, this oath that he would do it all right, and so now, now they feel bad. He feels bad because he's being suspected and he could be a part of it, like we read. But they feel bad because they're telling him that he may actually be from those people. Let's take a look at the Yalkut Shimoni, piece 571, which actually tells us a story of how it once happened that a Sadducee burned the incense before entering the Holy of Holies, which is exactly the conversation. How do you meant to do it? And when he exited, he was overjoyed, and then he meets his father, and his father told him, "You're right that we are Sadducees, so like good move, but we've got to be wary of the Pharisees." So he responded, and you can see from this kind of response that he means it with all sincerity. He says, "All my days I was pained by the verse, for in a cloud I will appear on the ark's cover. When would I have the opportunity to fulfill it? And now that I have the opportunity, I shouldn't fulfill it." But the story continues that it was said that it wasn't many days, it wasn't long before he died, and he was disposed in a garbage heap with worms exiting his nostrils, which gives you the strong impression that immediately after this young man, this Kohen Gadol, had violated the oral Torah, he met his end. And now comes the lesson that we can all learn from this entire conversation. And I think that this lesson, it will be quite relevant for all of us. So let's do this. And I think we should do it again. Let's go for Reb Shmuel.
Okay, here we see the great value of loving your fellow. The teaching speaks of the day before Yom Kippur, when everyone is occupied with their preparations for the holy day of forgiveness. The elders of the court were making the final preparations to ensure that the Yom Kippur Ketoret offering in the Holy of Holies would be carried out properly, and they therefore administered the oath to the high priest. And after they had fulfilled their Torah-given obligation in a matter so significant and so vital, they would leave in tears because they were forced to suspect another Jew. And this was canonized as a ruling by Maimonides regarding the Yom Kippur service.
Okay, Juan.
If we need a lesson about the significance of loving your fellow, this one law will do. As say, the physical temple no longer exists, but nevertheless, it is represented in a spiritual form through our thoughts and speech, in prayers, and even in actions by fulfilling deeds that aren't limited to the temple era. The same is true here. We learn a powerful lesson about the significance of loving your fellow.
Okay. So what do we? So this is, here you have this fantastic story, and this fantastic episode of Jewish law tells us about the need for loving and for not suspecting another Jew. And since now we don't have a temple, so we don't have this situation, we have to take a lesson from this experience and apply it to our lives. Where can we apply it to our life? We can apply it to our life in a way where perhaps a person might once have been slighted by someone else, and they can use these teaching to be sensitive to what they may have done to that person or that person to them. Let's take a look at the following piece. And it's interesting here that we jump straight into this connects to Simchat Torah. So you're wondering, like, what's the connection to Simchat Torah, right? Well, let me tell you. This Sicha from the Rebbe was actually said on Simchat Torah, and when the Rebbe said it, Simchat Torah in 770 in the Rebbe Shul was a unique experience. And one day we'll all go together to go visit that shul, and you'll discover that the hall is very, very, very small. Definitely not big enough for the crowd that used to attend. There could have been 10,000 people in this room. And when I say 10,000, you're like, oh yeah, sure, it's exaggerating, but it was quite literally like that. And in my, although I never experienced this room together with the Rebbe in living person, but I've been there at close to max capacity, and it's crazy. It's crazy. And what do I mean crazy? I mean that we stood. I personally did this. I stood shoulder to shoulder to people, definitely people I never met in my life, but not just shoulder to shoulder. There were people like we were crammed in like sardines in a can in this impressively tight experience. And really, what I should do is I should Google a video of what it would look like and show you guys. It's just unbelievable the tight connection that people had, the tight physical space. But effectively, what happens when everybody's jammed into one small area and everyone is trying to jostle their way to a better viewing location so that they can see? What effectively happens is a young kid who can jostle a bit harder might knock over an older fellow. And so here comes the lesson. This is why the Rebbe says that it's connected to Simchat Torah. So let's take a look. I'm going to reshare the screen and we'll read another comment right over here. Okay, there you go. So let's get where we're up to. Carlos, you read? Let's go, Carlos.
Okay, this all connects to Simchat Torah. We see that on Simchat Torah, a situation might arise in which you do not properly respect another person's dignity. And it is even possible that you will push him. The above lesson teaches us how careful we must be to preserve another person's dignity. Even when the elders of the court fulfill their obligation, administering the oath of the high priest to fulfill their instructions without adding anything else, it still brought them to tears. We raise this subject because of this situation. If someone suspects that he may have pushed a fellow without pure intentions, everything will be forgiven if you'll apologize to the individual, but it needs to bother you to the point of tears.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So it's, in a way, it's a fascinating lesson from the Rebbe. You know, you jostle and you hustle, but pay attention to what you're doing and to who you might be knocking over. And even if it's important and you need to do it, you can still afford to go over to that person who you badgered and apologize, right? And I think that each of us can find a way to incorporate this into our own lives when there's a moment in our life where somebody else had a situation and we slighted them in some way. We didn't stand up for them, or not only did we not stand up for them, but maybe we even put them down, God forbid. We can always be somewhat just a little more sensitive to their circumstance. So I want to tell you a story of sensitivity, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. So the story, I speak a lot about the Rebbe, and one of the times that I've spoken about, I must have told you about a farbrengen. A farbrengen is a gathering of Hasidim, where it's usually informal, and it's usually there's one leading speaker who kind of engages the crowd intellectually and emotionally to encourage everybody to better themselves and to improve in different ways. Now, typically, special days on the calendar are celebrated with a farbrengen. So, for example, on a yard site, on the day that someone's parent or grandparent or predecessor has passed away, it's an opportune time to make a farbrengen and to discuss the person and the lessons that we can take from that person in our lives. So one of the days that there would be a farbrengen usually would have been on the 9th of Kislev. On the 9th of Kislev, it's the yard site of the second Chabad Rebbe. And so it fits that the Rebbe would lead a farbrengen. And this year, the year that we're talking about, it was 1974, they were expecting that the Rebbe would lead a farbrengen. But in the days preceding, the Rebbe did not tell his head chief of staff that he was going to lead a farbrengen. And so they waited. Everybody waits with bated breath. Will there not be? Now, on Shabbos, there was this kind of signaling that happened in Shul, in which the Rebbe communicated to the guy making the announcements if there was going to be a farbrengen. And what was that? Typically, a farbrengen happened between the morning and afternoon service, between Shacharis and Mincha. And so, if there was going to be a farbrengen, the Rebbe would walk out of Shul before the time of Mincha was announced. Okay, and that's a way to understand, that's a way for the Rebbe to indicate, today we don't need to announce a time for Mincha because we're going to daven right after the farbrengen. In this episode in 1974, Shabbos after davening, the Rebbe doesn't start to head out, and everyone's expecting that the Rebbe would head out and they would announce a farbrengen. However, the Rebbe is staying and waiting. And so the gabbai, the guy making the announcement, makes one announcement and he tells everybody about one activity happening in town, and he's waiting. And then he makes another announcement, he finds something else to talk about, and he talks about something else, and the third thing, and the fourth thing, waiting for the Rebbe to go out, that they should be able to, that they don't have to announce. But he sees that it's not going anywhere. So he announces, and Mincha is going to be at 4:30. And then the Rebbe leaves. Okay. So the Rebbe, the Hasidim are upset. The people around, they wish there would be a farbrengen. But okay, the Rebbe leaves, followed by his staff, and everybody continues on to their day. So the Hasidim are now expecting that if there's no farbrengen on Saturday afternoon, so then there'll be a farbrengen on Sunday night to take its place. And so Sunday, the Rebbe went, as he often did, he went to visit the burial place of his father-in-law, and he stayed there for a while. And he came back, and everybody's waiting for the announcement. There's going to be a farbrengen, and there's no announcement. And so now the people are stirring, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. So someone went to the Rebbe's staff, one of the staff members, to go find out what the situation is. And this is the story that he heard. There's a new family that had just moved to Crown Heights. The father, the mother, there was a single mother, and her son was having a hard time fitting into school. And so she had petitioned to the school to support him, and the kid was being bullied, and she asked the school to help him, that he shouldn't be bullied. But the school did not help. So then the next step that the mother could think of was to reach out to the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe to petition the school on her behalf. And so the Rebbe did. The Rebbe asked his secretary to call up the principal of the school on his behalf and ask them to take care of it. Okay. And so as soon as the Rebbe's secretary called up and said, hey, the Rebbe asked you to take care of this situation, of course they looked into it and they took care of it and they helped as well as they could. But this Saturday and Sunday in discussion, so the Saturday was the young man's call up to the Torah weekend. It was his bar mitzvah Shabbos. And after the bar mitzvah, there was going to be a kiddush, like there is in any shul. So the kid is sitting there at the at the prepared table, and he knows in his head, oh, today is the day on the calendar that the Rebbe is going to farbrengen. So my birthday party, my bar mitzvah farbrengen, is about to get cut short. I know that people are saying, they're saying Mazel Tov, but they're saying Mazel Tov to get out. Anyway, a few minutes into the Kiddush, somebody comes from 770, from the main shul where the Rebbe davens, and he walked into this other shul in town, and he says, oh, guess what? There's no farbrengen today. And so everybody settles down. They take off their coats and they sit back down and they sit at the table for this kiddush that would never have happened otherwise. And so this boy had a proper bar mitzvah Shabbos thing. And then on Sunday, when we were all expecting the farbrengen to take place, again, that was the boy's class bar mitzvah, where all of his friends from school would come. But the Rebbe said, had he made a farbrengen that afternoon, that evening, no one would stay at this young boy's farbrengen. And so the Rebbe chose to be sensitive for this young man, and he didn't arrange a farbrengen that year, so that this young man would have his bar mitzvah celebrated with the full fun that he deserves. And I think that these lessons can be a lesson for all of us, a lesson that I wish all of us to take on in a way that we can all find in ourselves to be just a little more sensitive to whomever it may be, if it's a spouse, if it's a sibling, if it's a parent, if it's a child, sensitive, or a neighbor, or a colleague, or a coworker, or an enemy. Find a circumstance where we could be just a little more sensitive and reach out to that person and grace them with just a little more love. And so I wish you all good health, good happiness, and more opportunities to be sensitive and to make a better impression on others in the world.